They came loaded up on them. And it's just like, well, if you do that, you need to resign as mayor. And it's like,
I did
you're
not
gonna
know
be,
that.
the city's gonna be paying you to say, no.
Open
And
it.
it's
She hasn't, she's not in.
Okay, well, she might be a few minutes late. I don't know where she is. Hopefully she's at her central standard time business. I'm just gonna send her a reminder real quick. Ready? You're not getting to say this meeting is beginning at 2:31.
This is September 6th, 2022. It is 2:31 in the afternoon, calling the Ordinance Review Committee meeting to order.
Public comment?
Yeah.
No public comments.
In the absence of public comment, you move to agenda item 1.
Is you something?
Oh, yes, there's a roll call on this meeting. Sorry.
Chairperson Emma Davenport. Here. Vice Chair Don Hector. Here. Committee member Karen Duncan. Yeah. Committee member Steve. Sorry, Steve. Committee member Randy Renton. Member David Love. In the absence of public comments, we are moving to our agenda. Is that what we're doing? Moving to our agenda. If no one has any, we have 4 items on our agenda. The first one is a report from City Council on key areas of focus for ordinance review. And the second one is discuss and take appropriate action on the report from City Council. Because this item will necessarily involve discussion, I would like, if nobody has any objection, to take up item 3 and 4 first, so that we will not feel rushed in our discussion of items 1 and 2. Anybody have any discussion of that? So the first item we will take up is then number 3 on the agenda, discuss and take appropriate action on minimum lot sizes under zoning, is what it says. Deborah, are you able to give us a very brief discussion of this? So, may I make a comment? Suzanne? I have visual difficulties and I actually can't easily read anything that's on an Never mind. Go ahead.
So if you look at your packet on page 8, you'll see a map, and that map shows our current zoning, and then you see a chart above it, and that chart shows the mathematics laid out in our code for each zone. Now, this item council brought up at one point, and then City Manager Britton Lewis said this needs to go to one of these other bodies first, and it got sent to the comprehensive plan work group, but it really didn't belong there. They didn't do much with it. It does sort of relate to some of the work they're doing, but specifically changing the code itself kind of falls more appropriately under this group, and then planning and zoning. So the goal for today is to make a recommendation to planning and zoning or to council to create actual minimum lot sizes. So the issue currently existing in our code is that we don't actually have minimum lot sizes defined. We have guidelines about the setbacks, and we have guidelines about the minimum square footage, and then you have to like do some magical math to decide what your minimum lot size is. Now, most of the lots in Wood Creek are already plotted out. And so this has not been a significant issue for us until you look at, for example, what happened with the Oaks. There are no designations for SF1 right now that say what the minimum lot size is besides these equations. And these equations allow lots that are very, very small, almost identical to what exists among townhomes here. So because we lack this in our code, it can create issues in the future for us if there's subdivision going on. This also applies out in the ETJ in that if somebody goes to create a subdivision of SF1, they have to follow our SF1 guidelines in our code. So it kind of has a double impact there. And then if there was any subdivision within lots in the city of Wood Creek, I know there's the Brook Meadow overlay protecting that area down to 1 acre. So you already have minimum lot sizes there, but there are lots outside of that overlay that could be subdivided. And so, so part of this is protection, part of it is just cleaning up business. This was actually brought to our attention by Kate Freeze, the employee Brandon. He is a kind of a trained city planner, and he was like, why doesn't your code have this? This is not normal. Code should have this outline. So what you have in front of you is basically just the preliminary math showing what our code says and giving you some indication as to what our zoning guidelines are. So your options today vary significantly. You can make specific recommendations of each category, what the minimum lot should be. You can simply say, we would like planning and zoning to take this up. You can say, we recommend this back to council for them to take up. The correct procedure would be for this to go to planning and zoning first, and that this falls under the code that they have direct influence over. Do you have any questions for me?
I have a question. Why, in the chart above, we have a single family 1 and 2, but in the chart in the legend, there is no showing for single family 1 and 2.
That's a good point. It's just a screenshot, so it's limited on how much it grabbed. The legend does extend all the way. It does have SF1 and SF2. It's just not scroll. That's just
So the light yellow, which is maybe the same thing as family 3, is also single family 1 and 2.
so the lightest yellow throughout most of Wood Creek is SF1. That darker yellow around Parview Circle there, do you know where I'm talking about? That darker yellow?
Yes.
That is the SF3. And then SF2, I would have to look at the map again.
Well,
That it looks like it's the bluish.
that is just, then is the green part the part that is not, that we don't have a rule for?
That green is recreational.
So we don't have
It's
a
the
rule
camp and the golf course.
for any of them. So for example, if you look at that chart, remove the whole last column that says total minimum lot size, because those calculations do not actually exist in our code. That information isn't there. All that is in our actual code is the minimum build, how big of a garage you have to have, how much parking you have to have, and what your limits are on impervious coverage. And then there's building setbacks. Now, taking all of that math, I created these minimum lot sizes. The problem with these minimum lot sizes is that they are like maxed out on impervious coverage, offer no, is Karen here? Offer no wiggle room on building porches, any of that. We already struggle with those issues with builders. So we don't really want to go this low. Also, a good average for SF1 in our community is closer to a quarter to a third of an acre, not 8,000 square feet. 8,000 square feet is, like I said, the sizes of like some of those townhomes. So SF2 is actually this orangey color, and so that's these homes right. Okay.
Oh, and, right.
That is the city hall.
I don't see color. I looked at my lot size, and it's about a little over 10,000 square feet, and the vacant lot next door to me is a little over 9,000. So of course, it's already been flat. But,
Yeah.
so, this note, it says it's 7 minimum lot size for 12,000 square feet. So are we going through a process to make it more official? Is that what we need to do?
So that is just for subdivision, it's setting a minimum lot size of no less than 12,000 square feet. That stands, but it does not replace the fact that, like, in our actual zoning code, we do not have minimum lot sizes, and that's not typical. We could say minimum lot size for SF1 is 12,000 square feet. Does that work for these other types of building? I'm not sure. I mean, again, we don't have to produce the answers today, and you guys can recommend whatever you want. What council did there was to eliminate the loophole that allows builders. So previously, what the code said is, this is our minimum lot size, but here's an exception. And so specifically, for example, the Oak subdivision came in under that exception.
Now, suppose you got an acre. You can go down to 2 4,
And here,
something there, yeah.
yeah,
That's something to consider too.
right.
1.5 acres, 1.5 acres.
We could do it in Brooklyn, but you wouldn't be able to do it in Brooklyn. The overlay restricted.
Wood Creek.
Yeah, Wood Creek General, but most of the half acre lots that we have, in any consistency that are in the Brooklyn. Pretty much the other ones that have been platted or ordered to third neighbor.
I think some of those in the house down, but not their house.
The legitimate concern, especially with the ages of our homes.
So one of the things that doesn't really come out here, but that I was thinking about when you're looking at the minimum lot sizes and sort of the minimum build size and the requirements for garage and parking, those kind of things that are set in the code, is that that's taking the smallest possible house you can put on that lot at the maximum impervious cover. So if you want to put a steps down, that provide, they're not pervious, then you're already at your limit. So that's one of the things that we find with new people coming into town and buying some of the houses. What do you mean I can't put a deck on? What do you mean I can't add a shed or this or that? Because they're already at the impervious covered limit. So we've got to figure out how to work some of that into the figuring when somebody's coming in to build on a lot in Wood Creek. That you don't, this is like the minimum. So we want to make sure that there's some wiggle room in there. So when they do want to add a room into their house, they can. They got the space for it. They just, what plan if that, especially in new development, because again, remember, y'all are already all platted. All of those lots are platted. It's only new development that this would impact, and that's most of them being the EPK. So this is sort of setting up what we want our neighborhood to look like as it grows.
And if any replatting requests occur for lots of this here, pointed out, um, and we've seen this happen in other neighborhoods, like in the Westlake area, Rollingwood, they've experienced this where, investors come in, purchase a nice property, remove the house, divide into two, build two new houses, and sell them. And it's happening all over Austin and I forget the name of the neighborhood, but like the South Bridge Street area, you're seeing a lot of this occurring. So it's a long-term vision. And, again, it also goes back to just the cleaning up the formality of you shouldn't have to do this equation to figure out what your minimum lot size is, and your minimum lot size shouldn't fluctuate with parking requirements. For example, at one point, E and Z was looking at, do we want to reduce our minimum parking requirements? Well, that should not impact your minimum lot size. Right now, it does. Right now, if you adjust our parking requirements, it shifts how small our lots can be. So some of this needs to stand alone. Now, back to the 12,000 square foot minimum that we talked about, that was a quick fix to close a loophole. Even that wording and that language is being cleaned up and worked on by Kate Reeves, and then we're potentially going to form a subcommittee to look at that. But like I said, formality purposes, this needs to come through y'all. Y'all make some sort of determination on it, what to do with it. Send it somewhere else. You can send with comments as well. Even if you don't decide what the minimum lot sizes are today, you could send this to P and Z and say, these are our recommendations for you to consider. Just throwing some ideas out.
Just to inform committee members, because some of us may feel like, what do we know about lot size, other than, I mean, I'm for minimum lot size. Let's do it today, you know, but sometimes decisions get made that way, and then down the road we find unintended consequences. So let's just say we all agree, let's have a Wood Creek wide minimum lot size of a 1/4 acre. Potentially, what might we be started for later?
Well, you would want to specify SF1 through SF6 because those are single family residences and they are different from, for example, a townhouse or a condo. And so that's a reasonable requirement. The differences between SF1 and SF6 right now, there's only one area where there's a use difference. The rest of it is all about minimum building sizes and things like that. So again, requiring a certain lot size, but allowing different size buildings is fine. There's no issue with that. You know, some of them it also has to do with the stories, like if they can have a second story or not. So you could say, we want SF1 through SF6 to have a 12,000 square foot minimum lot size. It's reasonable. You could go to 10,000 square feet as well. There's many of our lots that are 10,000. 12,000 seems to be a good average for us based on the calculations I've done on certain areas of the neighborhood. You know, there's some going down to 9, there's some way higher up to 13 and 14. They average out to about 12,000. I think that falls right up a 1/4 acre, right about.
1/4 acre is 2,000 feet.
So it's a third. Yeah, 1/3 acre.
That's 1/4.
No, I'm saying the 12,000 square feet is about a 1/3 acre.
Oh, I do.
Because we already have, do I understand correctly? We already have many lots in Wood Creek, long established, that are 1/4 acre.
Yes, yeah. So that's about 2,000 square feet. You said what?
Oh, the 1/4 acre is 10,890 square feet. A 1/3 acre is 14,520.
So those would be land kind of smack dab in the middle of those two.
So how does it get determined whether this is appropriate for the ordinance review committee or more appropriate for planning and zoning?
Well, this is an ordinance that we would be considering making. It should, in theory, go to P&Z next. because these ordinances fall directly under them. How it got to you all is because of me, because I asked that you place it on your agenda, because it was given to the comprehensive plan work group, which I am the co-chair of. And that work group has not been able to move forward with it because it doesn't really align with the work they're doing. The work they're doing is adjacent to it, right? But this is sort of its own thing, and they have not moved forward with it. So in an effort to resolve city business, I asked, yeah. Okay. Any further discussion?
How many on the parking? How much parking do you in that quarter acre? So you know the size is quarter acre. How much of that is chewed up by parking?
So right now in our parking regulations, we require 3 spaces, which is about 600 square feet. So 600 square feet of that is required for parking. And so if you look at that chart, you see your minimums over here. So by requiring a minimum of 12,000 square feet or even 10,890 or whatever y'all want to move forward with, you're allowing for parking, garage, building, that impervious coverage, excuse me, and then you are allowing for sidewalks, decking, sheds.
Those driveways with the gravel centers and that, is that covered at all?
Yeah, so the reason those exist is because builders have maxed out their coverage, and so that gravel is considered pervious. And so by doing those little strips, they're knocking out.
So it wouldn't affect quarter acre.
No, so you would so there's another issue here at play, is that we need something to direct builders. So a new build should have a lower impervious coverage than an existing property, meaning when you build the property, you shouldn't max it out right away. Because then somebody comes in and moves in on a property and they can't put in a shed, they can't put in a deck. We're having that issue as well. So that's a whole separate issue that we need to address in our code that is relevant to this conversation. So when looking at your numbers, you could say, okay, our future minimum lots need to be 12,000 square feet because people are wanting to do these other things. Or 10,000 square feet seems adequate for most of these other building types, but so go ahead.
The 12,000 number, really came out of the subdivision code that says that if you are bringing a subdivision in to the Wood Creek area and you're tapping into city water, if you're going to have water and wastewater, then the minimum lot size is 12,000 square feet. Because that's just what was in the code. So that kind of is where that 12,000.
Absolutely.
So it's already kind of coded for SF1. As far as that goes, because if they're going to be building, if this is in the ETJ and they're bringing in, and they're not going to create their own mud or something to bring their own water or wastewater in, then they're going to have to use aqua. They're going to have to use, our water system. Then the requirement is 12,000 square feet. So there's some precedent for that already at that number. And then the question after that is when you look at SF2, SF3, SF4, and you look at the map, a lot of times the reason those are zoned that way when the developers came in, they put all those little houses around Wildwood, and so they're small, they're on small lots, and so they said, okay, well that zoning that we're going to put over there, matches what's there, and if somebody tears one of those houses down, they have to sort of replace it with the same style house, or they have to take 2 houses, put them together and rezone it. So the stuff that's there is, it's like we're not coming up with new single family coding. We're just sort of saying, okay, so these things that exist, is there a logical number that can be applied to it? And I would say that anything that y'all would apply if you decided is a little, it's gonna by nature be a little bit arbitrary. We know the 12,000 is real, but if you go down to, okay, well now SF2, the difference between SF2 and SF1 is a few hundred square feet of the actual structure itself. Everything else remains sort of the same. So if it's reduced by, you know, what, 500? Yeah, 500, if that house is that got two is reduced by 500 square feet, then there's, you know, an appropriate number of reduction in the minimum lot size. So maybe it's 500 square feet, maybe it's 1,000 square feet. You know, but there's something there should be an appropriate number there.
One of the things that I see is the attractiveness of our Wood Creek neighborhood.
But we want to look at it.
And I have had the opportunity in the last couple of weeks to drive around the Broncos, Isle, Buda, and the houses are on top of each other, and they are growing up left and right. And to me, it looks awful. I don't care how expensive those houses are. They look awful, because I can reach out and touch the one next to me when I'm standing on the wall of mine. So I think 12,000 feet sounds very good to have, is a very basic thing to give us the kind of open, the trees, the, you know, the flora. And all
And if I
that.
could say one more thing, and then I promise I'll just shut up. But it sort of gets
We
back.
appreciate you, but yes.
If you know, one of the things that you're saying is that why ordinance review instead of P and Z? This is my perspective on it. But, you know, I see ordinance review as sort of this big picture strategic group that's saying, okay, well, what do we want our ordinances to reflect? Because y'all don't write ordinances. You just sort of say, okay, well, here's something, and from, you know, 35,000 feet, you know, we want to see the character of Wood Creek maintained. This is one of the ways to do it. So you make recommendations, and it goes to the proper other body to make it happen. P and Z is nuts and bolts. You know, y'all are up here. P and Z does nuts and bolts things. They change the language in the zoning code, and then it goes to the council, you know, for final approval. So you know, if you think about that as sort of your role in everything you look at is like, you know, not the minutia, but really what is the guiding. And I sort of look at the comprehensive plan and said, well, according to the comprehensive plan, we should be doing this. So this, you know, this little group of ordinances needs some more. So does that make sense?
Yes,
So, in leading into the comprehensive plan, essentially, the input we've received from the public is that they want to see our character protected, larger lots, less dense housing, less townhomes and condos, and more just single family residences. Obviously, there's also the understanding that affordable housing tends to look more like townhomes and condos and things like that, and that there is like some demand for that. And it wasn't like people were like, none of these. I'm just talking about the preferences. The preferences were larger lots, single family residence, more of what Wood Creek already has. So
What is considered a large lot?
over a third of an acre, that's a large lot by most people's standards. Yeah, a quarter is getting tight.
Because the ones behind me, they're not much. They're smaller than a quarter.
Right.
I live on a border right here, patio. I mean, kids could run around in there a little.
Yeah. The other thing we're forgetting in this is like a lot of homes in Wood Creek sit on one lot and then the person owns the lot next to it. There's a lot of that occurring here. So many of our lots look large, but technically aren't by platting purposes. So when you look at our map with all of these lines are not occupied by homes. Does that make sense? There's a lot of homes that, oh yeah. So that's something to keep in mind. We really love that look. Enforcing those larger lots could be problematic or difficult. It's not out of the question, though. It's just, it's best to find something that's kind of realistic, because to enforce it, you know, you want there to be less obstacles. You know, and you made a good point, at a quarter of an acre, can you install a playscape? And you have a trampoline, and you have, you know, these are things that our community is likely to want, given the makeup of it. You know, so, can you garden on a quarter? You can, but is it, you know, possible?
So, do you want us to make a motion?
Is Karen with us?
I don't know, it looks like,
I think that Suzanne just went back and checked. Yeah, that's Suzanne.
Okay.
Let me see. Yeah, this is Karen.
I wanted to see
Yeah,
it.
Karen just signed in.
okay. So if y'all wanna move forward with making some recommendations, which it kind of sounds like you're on board, and looking at our chart, you know, SF1 has our largest build requirement of any of the single family residences, so we could easily say for that one, you need a third of an acre, that's 14,520. Then if you look at SF2, you're dropping down 500 feet, but you still have the same requirements for garage and parking. So SF2 and 3, you could decrease slightly in the minimum lot sizes needed, or you could leave it the same. The only area where I think it would be relevant to go ahead and go down to 12,000 square feet would be in the SF4 and 5, because SF4 does not require a garage, and it has a very small build. SF5 requires a smaller garage. You see what I'm talking about? SF4 and 5, you could go down to 12,000 square feet.
Which is still more than a quarter of an acre.
Yes. It also meets our minimum subdivision to tie into wastewater services. And to have a septic, you have to have an even bigger lot.
Big curve.
And, you know, again, this,
For housing.
yeah, no, well, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, and things like that also drive some of this, but, you know, again, looking at the ETJ, future development, those kind of things, these guidelines are going to be almost more enforceable than even just a minimum lot size in subdivision, because there are state rules that sort of limit what you can say as far as lot sizes go. But if they're creating a certain type of housing, they have to follow those zoning regulations.
So I'm not entirely sure, how we wrap this up.
So why don't we go down the list? What do you think for SF1, what do you want to recommend for a minimum lot size? Do you want to go with the third of an acre, which is 14,550 square feet?
And SF1 is what?
Most of the houses in Woodbury, all of the light colored yellow. So it will be more of what we have in general. But a larger lot size, because some of our SF1 now go down to about 9,000 square feet. For some of the smaller ones, I still have some.
But making a requirement above what you might be able to call the norm does not open us to, effective objection later.
It's not retroactive. An existing plat remains it's a plat.
Okay, do you think the 14,000 is a little large? You're building, or would that be, is that so we can have like add on a room? That's at 15, a minimum build of 1,500 square feet. My house is 1,400 square feet on 10,000 square feet plot, which is very ample. Now, maybe I couldn't add on too much, but I might be able to add on some. I just wondered if that considering that we're limited, I mean, we're gonna run out of money eventually, but maybe back off a little bit back to the 12,000, or does that include, if you're adding, when you say minimum build, does that add the 400 feet, so it makes the total 9? No, do those I guess what I'm asking is, does the bill, the garage, and the parking all add together to the total?
So if you look at the column 30 versus total, the impervious coverage column, yeah, so your impervious coverage column is total. So if you have a total of 2,500 square feet of impervious coverage, the minimum lot size you could have by those standards is an 8,000 square foot lot. However, to tie into wastewater, you need a 12,000 foot minimum. So we're looking at something between 12,000 foot and some other number for all of those.
All right, that sounds good. And what did you say a third of an acre is?
14,520 square feet.
Oh, I wrote that as that. That's fine.
So are we waiting for someone to make a motion? Or
I think,
recommendation?
well, I was saying if you wanted to go down the chart and sort of express what minimum you'd like to set, we could kind of compile that list and then you could make a recommendation to send it to P and Z or to council or whatever.
So, yeah, it has been recommended that for single family one, that we, set a minimum size of 1/3 acre, which is 14,520 feet. How do you feel about that? Okay, that's good. Say I do too, right? So SF2, and you'll have to retell me, I don't know what all these.
Yeah, could I?
Yeah.
So all the rest of them, you know, SF 2 through 6, are all approximately the same size. So you just say, and everything else is a quarter.
There's garage changes. You can't go down to a quarter because that's less than 12,000 square feet. You could
Well,
go,
because we're talking about a third, just.
Yeah.
Make all the rest of them, I mean, but they're all end up at the same size, you just lump them all together. Because these numbers haven't been set in the past. You know, this is new, so you can set whatever number you want. I mean, P and Z may go nuts.
Well, and I'm not clear, why would you build a house without a garage or a carport or something?
Because,
Well, we're not
like,
even up.
yeah, like some of the little cottages over by the golf course, they don't have room for, they don't even have room for, is,
Oh, we don't allow. Yeah.
right, now.
Yeah.
But there are some that were.
Oh,
so I mean, you could go down for SF2 and 3, you could drop 500 off of it and go down to 14,000. And for SF4 and 5, you could go down to 12,000 because they have different garage requirements. And then SF6, you could go back, or you could, you know,
Oh, yeah.
you could do 2 through 6, all 12,000. The thing is what's going to happen, you have to be a little bit careful with this, is because you're going to drive people away from SF1. If they have all of these other, you know what I mean? Meaning like, if I'm a builder and I'm looking at this and I can build all of these different types of houses with 12,000 square feet, what incentive do I have to go SF1? So you just want to be careful about not incentivizing in the wrong direction.
you're talking about potentially in the ETJ.
Or even in our own neighborhood, we have many large lots outside of Brook Meadow that could be subdivided in the future. Yeah. At one point, I created a map of all of those, and it was more than, it was like 10 to 15 other lots. No, these were not multi-lots, this was lots large enough to subdivide. Based on the, you know, that was based on these numbers, because right now you can take a lot and divide it down to 8,000 square feet almost and build houses, you know, like. So by stating this, we're essentially preventing future subdivision of existing lots.
And that is that's actually our purpose. That's what we're trying to do. So, forgive me, maybe I missed it, but why would we not want to just be consistent and say the 1/3 acre?
You could, it's just it's a giant lot with, in some cases, no garage. I mean, they could put a garage. I mean, you could So there's only one area where there's a change of use for SF. Does that make sense? The rest of the time, so this was something else Brendan also highlighted, which was a little, you said was kind of odd, was that we have all of these single-family residence designations, and that it's all based on building sizes, which typically, there actually also potentially changes of usage as well. And that was something he was like, it's kind of interesting, they'll have, and more often than not, it's also like whether or not you can have a second story.
Doesn't change the use.
Like short-term rental or mixed use, meaning, you know, SF4 could have a business running out of it, whereas SF1 does not. So in cities like Austin, or San Marcos, you see a lot more of that because you have neighborhoods that are buffering up to commercial zones. And so then the ones closest to a commercial area will have a slightly different zoning than the ones buried deep in the neighborhood, because those homes can house a home office and it not be inappropriate. Does that make sense? So Wood Creek lacks a lot of that right now.
You can't hang out.
Sir?
You can't hang out a shingle here. So, I mean, but in San Marcos, you know, you have, and you can put a sign up in your front yard.
Right.
You know, there- you can't really do that.
Oh,
No,
no,
neighborhood I live in, Candy Lane.
No, yeah, it's,
Was
this
it,
might
was
be a
it
little easier.
and it turned into car lots and businesses.
We-
all over.
Well, it's not
And
grass.
I didn't realize we were gonna get.
So see where it says, so SF4 is the only change of use area that we have right now. And short-term rentals are currently allowed in that area.
They all look the same.
It is a not very differentiated color map. So, I mean, I feel like, okay, SF1, you guys were saying 14,520 square feet. I feel like SF4 and 5 go down to that 12,000 minimum, because those are the ones where you're not required to have a garage, or it's a single garage. Your houses are 1,000 square feet or smaller. And then if you wanted to come back for SF,
What number did you say before the time?
4 and 5, they could be minimum 12,000 square feet.
And that still enables everybody to have water and whatever they use. Okay, okay. Go ahead. Yes.
Do you want what the differences are?
Oh, what's allowed on each,
I'm okay, I mean, I have a pretty good memory of it, but,
Here is our side streets and stuff.
so none of that impacts the minimum lot size. So so this, the problem is why we need minimum lot sizes, because right now, the only thing that says what minimum lot size you can have is this calculation of minimum building and impervious coverage, and that percentage drives the size of the lot.
All right, so you said 1, 14,520, 45, 12,000. Go ahead with your list.
Well, then 2, 3, and 6, I feel like you could set the same, because they have, everything else is the same amount.
When you say the same as each
Meaning,
other.
it's a 1,000 square foot build, garage of 400 square feet, parking of 600 square feet, impervious coverage is 2,000 square feet. And if you want to look at the chart, I don't even know, is the differences between single story or not?
That's the one.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm saying between 2, 3, and 6.
2, 3, and 6. SF2 is gonna have a second story of 500 square feet. SF3 can have a second story of 200 square feet. SF4.
No, 6.
Nope.
That's a 6.
SF6.
No.
Second story.
So maybe SF6 could be as small as 12,000 square feet as well, because you're not having a second story. And then you could make SF2 and 3 the same, and they could decrease minimum 500 under SF1.
Or is it SF1 is 14,520?
Right. So 1420. Okay.
the only ones that allow the second story in the asset categories is 1, 2, and 3. And then, of course, townhouse.
So the townhouses, duplex and fourplex, are also in that chart. You guys all know what those are. I mean, do you want to just say 12,000 square feet per townhome? I mean, it gets a little bit tricky there. For a single standing townhome, I mean, it should be 12,000 square feet still, right? I mean, but see, that's the thing with those, is they have those shared community lawn spaces. They don't own their lawns. So the builder, I guess, would then have to designate the lots for each house, and then just the understanding that these are shared community spaces and not individually owned, or would they be individually? I mean, we're not getting to decide that, but I'm just presenting that in the concept of what do you think is a reasonable minimum lot.
Where is the three side of the house we want to have? So,
You can regulate zoning, and that's it. Meaning, we could say townhomes are not allowed in this area, but you can't say they're not allowed at all.
Because we already have them.
Not just because we already have them, but because the way the Texas law says, you can't tell somebody what kind of, that they can't, it's weird, Texas is very developmental friendly. So you can create zoning, you can create maps of zoning, and you can limit what people can do in those zones, but you can't say nothing, you know, and you can't, once somebody buys in that area and these types of buildings are allowed, you can't say now you can't do that.
oh, you can't establish things on this other
You could if you're an HOA. We are not an HOA, we're a city. So that's the difference, is that a city can't regulate down to that degree. A type A general law for sure. I can't see the home rule. Again, the way the city do regulate this stuff is by using zoning. Zoning and maps. So they have, you can't say it's not allowed anywhere. But you can say this area is where it makes sense. But I mean, like, if you look at our zoning, you know, the zoning still applies to existing lots. So by saying, you know, all the SF1, that yellow color, if you set this as the minimum lot size, it applies for all of those. They can't put it in townhomes. The only place they can put it in townhomes is where it's zoned for townhomes. Right now, we don't have any of that zoning inside our city limits, except for where it already exists. Now, somebody could take this lot, zoning, it's outside, actually, this is in the Brook Meadow overlay, isn't it? Can we just have
Yes, but.
this thing in there?
one.
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah, okay, or like, look at this right here, this whole corner right here, a bunch of really big lots, prime candidate for smaller housing. Right? So somebody could come in and request a zoning change. The city would have to look at it, they'd have to hold public hearings, and they could request a zoning change for townhomes. And divide that chunk up into smaller things. That's the whole process, right, of changing your zoning. What we're talking about a lot of this applying is out on the ETJ. Let's say this giant property owner on the north side of Brook Meadow, they decide to sell off. Right? And they're gonna tap into our wastewater. And they're gonna come to us and say, we wanna build this type of housing. Right? What if they're like, we want it all townhomes?
what time zoning change goes. And that kind of defeats the purpose of having zoning, if you're gonna change it. Allow it to be changed, depending on popular council, or whatever.
Yeah, that's why you be a voter and.
And then you have to have something in place.
Yeah.
To change, otherwise it's a free-for-all.
Another difference is the setback line.
Suzanne, I need you to speak a little louder.
I'm sorry, another difference between the SF1 through 6 is the setback line.
Yeah, they don't impact, those lines don't impact the lot size. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, but the bigger lot, those setback lines would stay, they would shift with the size of the lot. So if you say it's a 12,000 square foot lot, it goes like this, if it's 4,000, it goes like that. So, I mean, do you have recommendations on townhomes? What we want, do you want to just say 12,000 square foot minimum for townhomes, because then they can tap into the wastewater?
Well, they would need to, right?
Right. It's whether or not you want to go above that. That's your minimum right now. And then if you look at duplexes, now duplexes is two families on a lot, should those be bigger?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say it out loud, but I don't feel qualified to decide that.
You're just making recommendations.
Oh, good.
That's a mercy. And you're qualified, you're a citizen of Wood Creek, you have an opinion,
Okay.
you've lived here a long time.
All right.
I would say, why don't we raise that 12,000, 14,000?
Okay.
Because
For 4, 5, and 6, or just for townhomes and duplex?
Maybe to a third of an acre, 4,520 square feet for duplexes. So what that means is that that double home that's got a shared wall has to sit on a third of an acre in the future. Okay. And then the last one is a fourplex. Currently, the minimum square footage for that is 21,334 square feet with maxed out impervious coverage. That's for a fourplex.
That's a little less than that.
So what's a half acre?
21,780 square feet.
Do you want to bump it to that, just a full half acre?
Yes. I do too. I do too. I thought that make it 2/3. I would have 2 left.
Yeah. I mean, the only benefit to this, in those categories, townhome, duplex, fourplex, for those lot sizes being slightly smaller, is a lot of times people buy those types of homes for less maintenance. So, you know, that is something to consider. Yes, so where do you want to send these numbers to?
I would like to recommend that this item with our new figures be sent to planning and zoning, and that they then, after due consideration, that they send it on to our city planners.
To city planners or
Or
to council?
It would go to city council, and then
Am I allowed to say?
We need a second.
Am I allowed to do this? A second. Do I call for discussion?
Call for a vote. Oh, vote. Okay. Chairperson Emma Davenport,
Yes.
Vice Chair Don Hector.
Yes.
Committee Member Steve Hasselhoff.
Yes, yes.
And a workshop on your name.
Yes.
And Karen's here, but I don't know if she can hear us or not.
Karen,
I'm- I can't get my camera to work. Our internet has been messed up all weekend. And I keep clicking on the camera. It doesn't do anything. I say vote yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, did you have anything to add? Because we couldn't see you. We were.
I know I can't get, this has just been my life for a while with the internet since about Friday. You know, I just wonder if the city has a philosophy of housing. And this is really obtuse because I understand you're talking about sewer and water and but as I've watched the prices in Wood Creek go through the roof, I just want to be sure that if a teacher or a librarian wanted to move into Wood Creek and teach at the primary school that's walkable, that as decisions are made about what the housing stock will look like because of lot size and requirements, that we're thinking about them. But you know, if you have a minimum for water and sewer, that's kind of the minimum. So that's what I mean, that's probably not what this question is.
I mean, I think it is what it is, and I think you made a good point, and I think that as this group has decided, there are options in SF 4, 5, 6, townhomes, duplexes, and fourplexes for, you know, that average to medium income family. Because they are smaller lots. Now, the burden of providing affordable housing can't just be solved with cheap houses or lots of housing, and it doesn't necessarily just fall on a city either. So
Oh no, I don't think affordable housing, it's just you know, to make sure that the philosophy is inclusive rather than exclusive, because yeah, I agree with you totally.
Okay. Thank you very much, Karen. So we're through with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move on to.
It doesn't impact a lot, which is the only reason why it's not on there. But P and Z should be familiar with our code. And potentially, in that agenda item, you can attach that portion of the code to it. Does that make sense? For them to review and consider.
So we're moving on now?
Yes, ma'am, sorry.
All right. So now we're going to take up item number 4 on the agenda, discuss and take appropriate action on the formation of a subcommittee to review and edit the important Wood Creek City ordinances citizen handout. So this is a copy of that. This is not complicated. This is a very helpful handout for citizens. We simply want to review it and be sure that that it is as concise as it can be, and as helpful as it can be, and as accessible as it can be. We want to make information readily available to people. I went on our city website and I put in first I went to the city website, then I put in ordinances, and then I did construction, and then I got 10 plus pages of stuff, and then I put in 151, which is what we referenced beside that on this handout, and I got 4 pages of stuff. So what we want to do is go through this and be sure that the ordinance references we give actually lead people to the information they want, but that they also have just a quick something they can see where they can say, okay, fences, a chain link fence is not allowed. But if they need the details, we reference the full ordinance, but we want to be sure that I think each of us need to go home and see, does 151 really lead us to the information that we're talking about? So what I was wondering, since there are 5 committee members, active committee members, if each of us wanted to take 2 or 3 of these, because some are simpler than others, and simply look at the wording, be sure that it's as clear as it can be, and short. We're talking short and sweet. You can read the whole thing if you want to, but just getting the pertinent information. But also referencing the, ordinance that we send people to, actually put that in the search and see what happens, and is that really where the helpful information is?
Like creating an index?
Well, I'm talking about doing it just exactly like it is, but see if any wording needs to be changed, see if we need to take some out, see if we need to put some in. And where we say, for instance, on fences, 156.030 and 156.057, put those in and see what it says. If it takes you to decks, well, then we've got a problem. And if it takes you to the pertinent information on fences, then we're good to go. We don't need to make this a difficult project. So, I wonder if there's any discussion about how you'd like to divide this up. I was thinking each of the 5 of us, I think there are 14 things here, but also give some thought to, is there anything not here that the average citizen might want? We want this very accessible, and I think we also want to put on here, if you have a question that's not answered here, call City Hall. And, you know, there's a helpful, City Hall is a helpful place, and we want people to know that, yes.
You know, they coincidentally, Aaron, may have just seen your agenda and reacted. We had an email come in from a citizen saying, yeah, I guess I got sent to the ordinance to review something about the tree ordinance. So you get sent to the ordinance, and this is like, you know,
Yeah.
it's like the ordinance, and you know, have to get, so wouldn't it be nice to have something that just sort of explained it a little bit in plain English? You know, it's kind of like what we do with our agenda items, where we do the cover sheet, where we do, well, okay, here's the agenda language. Okay, that's pretty weird, but here's a description of what, I mean, if you had just, you know, a little description and some bullet points about, you know, commonly asked questions about this ordinance, if it's fences or if it's tree ordinances or something, like kind of cover sheet, you know, you can refer people to and say, hey, to read more.
I like that. I like that.
I like to deal with, you're talking about, if it takes you somewhere and you consider it not long. You know, I ran into that with fences, and they were antennas structured, the whole structure.
Yeah. I found that too,
Yeah.
so that's what we need to clean up.
But so when you clean the antennas out of the fences, then you gotta create something for the antennas
Well,
somewhere
no,
else.
that is absolutely true. However, this is not meant to be comprehensive. This is what, am I correct, Suzanne? This is what people most often call City Hall now. So, we're not intending to cover everything here. We're intending to just cover the issues that people find most often of concern. Yes.
And I just wanted to point out, I believe the intention also is just to focus on the document, not to then dive into those ordinances themselves and start trying to clear them up again, because that's a separate process.
We do that later.
You're just looking at, and then the other component to this was how to better publicize this and get it more accessible to residents, because the beginning of this was, Emma said, why don't we have this? And staff was like, oh, we do. And then everybody sitting at the tables was like, what? This exists? Where is it? And Maureen produced it, but none of us had ever seen it. So it's kind of a 2-part process. Clean it up, make sure it aligns. You know, we established at one meeting that some of it has actually been out of date because the ordinances have since been updated. And then, you know, kind of address how can it be improved, like make it more understandable, and then how can we get it to citizens better. And then I was going to read the comment that Mayor Roscoe was referencing. It says, is it not possible to state an ordinance in plain English, Spanish, etc., and then fill it in with all the legalese that is required, so that the average human being can understand what is being said in the ordinance? It would help. Thanks for your attention to this request question, Jerry Simendel.
I agree heartily. After the 5th or 6th whereas, my eyes are rolling in my head and I'm thinking, I don't care anymore. I do what I want and nobody turns me in, you know.
Lawyers are paid by the hour. Take them out of writing whereas it's-
So, committee members, Karen, what do you think? I think if we try to do this in a meeting like this, it'll take us a long time. So how do you feel about
Karen,
each of, I beg your
Karen
pardon?
did.
Oh, Karen, go ahead.
I started on one of them last night on animal control, just trying to compare what's in it to what's the ordinance said. So I like your idea of dividing them up. The other thing I noticed last night when I was reading them is it's a lot of no, 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 no. And it would be a lot more user friendly if what you're supposed to do is said instead of what you're not supposed to do. Like, just an example is under fire prevention, no fireworks allowed without a permit. It would just be nice if it said a permit is required to do fireworks. I mean, it's just, get rid of the no, 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 no. It's like, don't eat the crayon, now what do you do? But I would volunteer for some of them, and I've already started looking at animal control.
Wonderful. Karen, I'm so glad you brought that point up. I've thought the very same thing. Instead of telling a kid he cannot have a lemonade stand, just for instance, let's bring him in and help him find the right way to have one.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And there's a couple of things, I don't know what the definition of certain things are, and it may be in the ordinance. I just didn't get that far.
Okay. So do you want to volunteer, Karen, for animal control? And if each of you could pick, say 2 or 3, because some are simpler
Well, I
than
can
others.
do, yeah, animal control, I started looking a little bit at fire prevention and health and sanitation. I'll do those 3 because they're all in a row.
Okay, you get those 3, Karen. Health and sanitation, animal control, fire prevention. Steve,
Yeah.
do you have, how about we put you fences, Steve? I mean, you should be an expert by now. Do you want to pick another?
Traffic's fine.
Traffic is Steve, okay.
Line would be okay.
Okay, so that gives you 3. Donna, do you have 3 you'd like?
Okay, I will do garage sales and signs and weapons.
Okay.
Weapons.
Or weapons.
Yeah.
Okay, and I will get with Randy and we'll take care of the rest. So let's plan on addressing that our next meeting. Is that fine? I do, is this the proper place to ask questions and inform the committee of things? If it isn't, just tell me and I'll hush up. Also remember, besides taking your 3, by the way, see if there's anything you think we need to delete or anything we need to add, okay? And we'll talk about it next meeting. One thing I would like to ask about is enforcement. Let's say I happen to live on a main road. I live on Brook Meadow, but let's say I live on one of the side roads where only my neighbors see me. And I put up a really darling artsy fence, which I would really like to do actually. And my neighbors don't say anything. They like it. They think my fence is really sweet. But it doesn't fit in with our requirements. So I'd like to ask about two scenarios. One neighbor doesn't like it, so she calls Suzanne and she says, you know, Emma's put up a fence and it looks to me like it doesn't fit code. What do you do? Do you come and you tell me I have to take my fence down? But number 2, what if my neighbor likes my fence and doesn't tell on me? And we lived very happily for a year, and then my neighbor decides her fence is falling down, so she wants to put up one like mine. But she's a better citizen, so she goes and gets a permit. And they tell her at City Hall, oh, you can't do that. And she said, oh, I did it last year. I'd just like to know, how do we enforce?
Can common sense play into things like this? I think we really need more common sense. To me, if it's offensive to everybody in the neighborhood and common sense says this is really off the wall, okay. But if you do something kind of cool that nobody thought of before and everybody likes it, why would you change it?
I agree with you, but if you have an ordinance that says you can only do,
Then
Ugly.
can we go and apply for a variance or extra permission or, I mean, what is that? Okay.
The only requirement on this, the only specific requirement on the type of fencing is those houses that back up to the golf course, and they have to have that metal fencing.
oh, I see. Okay.
Anywhere else, it doesn't matter what type of fence you put
No,
up.
it's not entirely, we
You
cannot
can't
have,
do chain
we
link.
can't have chain
Well,
link, we can't have barbed wire. Okay.
But of course, chain link's not anywhere, but mainly when you do apply for a permit, you know, the homeowners, part of the permit process is, you know, provide me pictures,
Okay,
which normally
I
comes
see.
with the worker's estimate.
right, okay.
Or sometimes, like, somebody took a picture of our fencing here, and that all goes through the permitting process. And then I tell them how far back they can put it, if they're gonna tie their neighbor's fence, you know, they have to get neighbor's permissions.
Okay,
So.
okay, thank you, that answers my question, that is more common sense
Yeah.
than I realized we have, so that's good.
So if you have a fence that's already installed and it turns out there's an issue, the process is that a letter would be mailed to the resident stating you are out of compliance with code. Please get in communication with us. From there, your choices are to get in compliance with code, fight it through the courts, or go to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment, which is our city council, can look, yes, in the mayor, can look at your case and decide whether or not they will make the exception for you. If granted, your fence stays in place as is. If declined, you go back to the beginning of either getting compliance with code or face repercussions through municipal court.
What is the exception for now? How is that?
Typically, to make an exception, the number one thing that we have used in my experience on the Board of Adjustment was if the change is cost prohibitive and there is no requirement for change, meaning it's not a safety hazard, it's not publicly like a problem, like in the instance that I voted on, the person had letters from all of their neighbors saying they were fine. There was a slight variation in height difference. It did not directly impact the golf course or anyone else. And the cost to make the change would have been more than the cost of the project, which is one of the things the state allows you to approve. What you can't approve is basically, like, if the city messed up and didn't catch it, we can't then enforce it later and force them to change, if that makes sense. So that was part of that same discussion, is that the city didn't catch, there was an error on the city's part, and then the enforcement was trying to happen after the fact. And so that kind of made room for acceptance of the thing.
But an exception is not a variance.
You can request a variance before,
It was a variance request.
Yeah.
Same thing.
but it was post. So variance can be requested before construction, or in this case, it happened afterwards, or the project was already completed, and then they were told you were out of compliance.
So, at the very least, then pay $600 for the exception for variance.
Yeah, it was approved. Now, the Board of Adjustment, yeah. So that is the process. Right now, we do not have a formal code enforcer in place because that falls under the jurisdiction of the city manager. And without a hired city manager employee, it's falling onto our other staff members. And they are very great at their jobs and doing what they can, but there's also a lot of other permits that are in place. So as far as like driving around looking for somebody's out of compliance fencing right now, there's not a whole lot of that going on.
I'm pretty sure if you would have that in place, it's $600 that I time choose. That's over and above what might have cost at all.
Well, I mean, the cost goes to pay for the location to have the meeting, the staff to hold the meeting, those kind of expenses, that's, and then the staff to process the paperwork. I mean, that stuff isn't free.
The newspaper ad.
Yeah, there's a newspaper ad that has to go with the public, because you have to hold a public hearing, and it's also, again, we have to think about, preventative measures, meaning if you make it super easy to go through the variance process, why have the code? You know what I mean?
Well, of course, if
So-
there are no consequences, then why not just do it? And
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, oh, sorry. Okay, well, I think your question was answered, I think we do have some common sense, so I'm glad to hear that. I did not know that. Okay. So are we ready to move on? Okay, so now we're moving to item 1.
Emma,
Yes.
so you have to vote to form the subcommittees.
Okay,
So somebody needs to make that motion to act on your decisions that you will form these subcommittees. And that has to be seconded, and then you all hold a vote. Yes, likely it will pass. You will have just assigned yourself.
okay.
I'll make a motion to go ahead and subdivide and go to the city ordinances.
A second.
Chairperson Emma Davenport,
Yes,
Vice Chair Don Hector, Committee Member Karen Duncan.
Yes,
that was a yes or?
It was a yes.
yes, I vote yes.
Gotcha. Committee Member Steve Passalacqua.
Yes.
Motion passed. So establishing subcommittees to review the important Wood Creek City ordinances. Motion has been made to accept that and pass. Okay. All right, so we're moving on to agenda item 1, report from city council on key areas of focus for ordinance review. I don't know that this afternoon we necessarily want to solve all the problems of the world, but this is something you're going to introduce to us.
Yeah,
I would like to make a comment, and another committee member has mentioned the same thing. For instance, number 1, it says masonry requirements need to be removed. So I went on the city website and I put in ordinances masonry, and I came up with a nice little chart, and it said 0. So is this already done?
I don't believe anything has been done. What that is referencing is that previously our city had a requirement to have a certain percentage of your house be masonry. The state of Texas has ruled that in primary structures, that you cannot, if it's approved as good building material through these building code manuals, then you, as a city, cannot regulate what a house is built on.
I understand that, but my point is, if council suggests to us that we remove masonry requirements, I need to know where that is.
I did the same look and I came up with a chart that said 55%.
That is,
Maybe I got an updated one.
I have no idea, but that's kind of I don't know. That's what the chart I found.
See, look here, it says no mason, 0, 0. Is that what that says? Do you mind if I-
percent masonry required, 55.
Oh, you're right. See, I don't know how to read a chart, Karen. Okay, you're right. Okay, so we do need to.
So that needs to be removed. And that's a formality process. So let
Can
me
we
just,
do that right now? And just say we need to remove that, right?
in theory, yeah. So,
Let's do it. I mean, if the Texas law says it, it's not like we need to discuss it, right?
yeah, okay, let me just back up and introduce the chart. Okay, so, what this is, you all, this committee asked for council to make recommendations on areas of the code to focus on, because council said, please look at all of the code in this macro perspective. Does the outline make sense? Does the organization make sense? what suggested changes do you have? This committee went back and said, okay, we'll do that. Can you also give us primary areas to focus on?
We really said was,
Yeah.
that is what we did.
So then council sat around in one meeting and kind of just shouted off some things that we knew. And then we also said, aside from sending these recommendations back to ordinance review, we also want to send it to P and Z and get P and Z to make recommendations. And then we also said, if council members have any further thoughts beyond this meeting, to email them. And those where you see the additional council member recommendations. So the first is what was said in the meeting. P and Z has yet to make recommendations. And then afterwards, you see additional council member recommendations. These recommendations are areas for you to look at and make a recommendation back. So obviously masonry requirements need to be removed. We all agree that's state required. Why that's on here is so that you don't, do all this research, realize masonry requirements need to be removed, and then go through that.
We do not need to remove.
No, what needs to happen with that is that it needs to finally happen because council has asked for it to happen at least once now that I know of, and a vote was taken. And so it's just a cleanup business that needs to happen with staff, and that would have been under the responsibility of previous city manager Brent Lewis. I believe that he exited the office before the most recent round of, okay, let me back up again. So when we make a bunch of changes to our code, they essentially pile up in this list of recent changes, and then we send all of that over to the Munica people, and then they make those changes, and we do it in it's like a file batch, like a batch. So in the most recent batch, that was left off. It's just an oversight. So it still needs to be cleaned up. The reason why it's on this list is so that you all understand we're aware it needs to be cleaned up.
But we do not need to, this
You
committee
do
does
not
not need to do
specifically.
anything about
What else these are things that we know need to happen. Parking code throughout needs to match the traffic code of chapter 70. Council made changes to chapter 70. P and Z has not acted on the rest of the code, which actually falls under their jurisdiction. There was an oversight in their meeting. They only looked at whether or not we should shrink down to 2 required parking spots. They missed the fact that they were actually supposed to look at aligning the rest of their code. Your recommendation could be P and Z needs to look at the traffic code and make it align with traffic chapter 70. Does that make sense?
Why don't we just go back and look at it again?
They probably should. I don't run P and Z. Well, neither, but you can see, this is the beauty of city business. And kind of the problem, meaning that you guys have the power to set a wheel in motion.
Okay.
You don't have to say the size of the wheel or where the wheel goes. You just say wheel in motion, and that wheel starts going again. So if a wheel gets stopped or falls over or is forgotten for a bit, you all can say, all right, and that's part of your power. You don't specifically change the code. You can make recommendations. You could write a whole ordinance and submit it to someone else, right? And so that's where y'all lie is getting those balls rolling again, getting those wheels back up. And it seems silly, but the city can't do stuff without these advisory or elected bodies telling you to do stuff.
But since we're incomplete, how did you muddle along before us?
This committee has existed in an ad hoc format prior,
Oh, I see. Okay.
but to be specific, certain people ran the government,
Okay.
and there was not a lot of citizen involvement.
Okay. Now that we have, and I cried a lot about it. It's just scary. All right, so one of us needs to make a motion.
No, so this is just a report. That's what this document is. It's just, for example, it says you can ignore chapter 30 because chapter 30 was recently updated by our city attorney and a council member. So all of chapter 30, you guys can ignore when you're looking at the code. So like in the future setting, you all might want to sit down and form additional subcommittees to divide out the rest of the code and start actually combing through it bit by bit because you have outlined the goals of minimizing, making it user-friendly, making it enforceable, making it less like an HOA. So eventually you will take portions of the code and then you have this reference document to go, okay, we can ignore the green spaces chapter because that was just written and then put into place. Or it says, I'm so sorry, that's my son's school bus. It says to ignore it, but maybe we do want to look at green spaces, but with the understanding that it was just written and put into place. So there might not be many recommendations.
So the way to go forward then is when we're very soon, because now we're trying to get organized and not wait till the day before meeting and decide what we're doing. So when we set the next agenda, the agenda for the next meeting, we might go through this list and say, okay, let's do this parking throughout code needs to match. Let's talk about that, and then we all have a month to prepare. Is that how we would do that? Now, when it says something like Board of Adjustment needs to be brought into line with state code, we're going to brought into line. The Board of Adjustment is the mayor and the council, right?
Yeah, so the requirements there, state says we have to have a certain amount of members present to equal a majority or whatever. And then our code is slightly different, so we just need to bring the two into alignment. You know, this is just a reference document for you all.
Well, but we have to set the agenda somehow, so,
Yeah,
so we
you
can start with this. So
Karen has a question.
Can I make a quick suggestion for baby steps? Since we're already reviewing this important Wood Creek City ordinances, if in that process, we would ask these two bottom questions, is this code serving citizens? And the way I kind of express that is, what's the public purpose of this ordinance? How does it serve a public purpose? And then whether or not there's reduction in enforcement needed, opportunities, we could do that as baby steps with the assignment that we've already accepted.
thank you, Karen. I agree with you. It's easy to be given the big picture and be totally overwhelmed and incapacitated. Actually, I have felt that way, but I can do baby steps. I agree with you. That's very good input. Thank you.
So that's the report. I'm here if you have questions. Okay. Your item 3 is to discuss and take action on that item if you would like to move forward with it. Remember, P&Z will be submitting their recommendations after their next meeting. And then I just want to highlight one thing before y'all try to wrap this up. In the future, we're supposed to move, and this is my bad because I didn't catch you, we're supposed to move through the consent agenda first. So item 1 on your agenda was actually to approve your previous meetings minutes. And so,
Now, are these available? I mean, I'm only just now seeing it, so obviously I haven't even read it, but that's probably my bad. This was available a long time ago and I should have.
it's posted with the packet, so.
Okay,
At least 3 days ago,
okay.
with the mayor.
Okay, but just for the future, so you put that on the city website when?
The minutes from a previous meeting, it normally gets posted with the mayor.
But when does that happen? A week before the next meeting or a week after the last meeting?
Minimum 3 days before.
Minimum 3 days.
I see. So reading, I'm just thinking about, I want to be ahead on planning agendas rather than feeling like I'm always trying to catch up.
So the city staff handles posting those into the agenda. What happens then is when you get that email saying your meeting has been called and here's the agenda is linked here and here is in bright blue. That's a link and it takes you to the packet and then that's where you'll see the minutes. Because you're right, because you only set 2 through 5, right? Number 1 appeared without your contributing, so you might not have been aware, oh, there's this other item going to be there, but you can expect minutes to appear in almost every single one of your meetings because staff tries to, yes, sir.
There's one other piece of that is that, you know, Maureen will say, hey, we got a copy of the minutes that you need to sign. So the chair signs the minutes, you know, that are put into the packet. So you should know, I mean, it's like if we've got it timed out right, You should know, okay, well, I remember signing those minutes, Maureen said, okay, well, those are gonna go in the next packet. So,
Have you got just 2 more minutes for me to ask you 2 questions? I know.
Oh, okay.
She's been.
Oh, need your sign.
No,
I would like to know if we, as a committee, just to inform us, not for our action, if we have a way to follow up to be sure residents are getting what they want. For instance, Steve, are you happy now with your fence issue? Is it solved? See, I would like to know, okay, now we know that. So we don't need to worry about that one anymore. But I would like to know that, I bet there's somewhere people would say, no, it hasn't been solved.
so, this is not on your agenda, so technically
So I
we
can't
are,
talk- I can't ask you that.
we are branching off outside of the agenda. I think it could, in theory, fall under this item, your next item, because it's discussed and take appropriate action on these recommendations. So it sort of falls under this. And I will reference whenever I helped y'all set up this agenda for the first time. I discussed the citizen survey. This could, it's kind of circling back to that concept of, does the ordinance review committee want to put out a survey, kind of like city council is giving you input, P and Z is giving you input. You all could put the same question to citizens. What areas of code work for you? What don't? Where would you like to see improvements made? And we have SurveyMonkey. You can do it online.
I was thinking more individually. Is Steve's problem solved? That was what I was.
I don't know the speakers of this.
Well, I can see where you're coming from, is it someone just to give up and say,
Yeah, exactly. And just fall between the cracks because it's more bother than it's worth. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, that's all I was asking. But so asking you questions like this, what we have to do is close the meeting and then I ask you. That's what's appropriate. I mean, I can ask you questions, right?
As long as the conversation is predictable according to the agenda, meaning it falls under the item in a reasonable manner, it's fine. We can't now talk about banning feeding deer, you know what I mean, because it's not on the agenda. So citizens have not had adequate alert that they might want to come and speak. So that's just the point, right? So if it falls, so right now your question of do we have a way for citizens to give input sort of falls under this because we're also talking about council input, P and Z input. It's a little bit off. If in regards to how an individual could give city input on their items, there are forms online to submit comment.
Oh,
We don't right now have any sort of formal follow-up process as far as like customer satisfaction. I know you talked about that before as far as like a form that goes out after every interaction with a staff member or elected official that says, are you satisfied? I mean,
kind of like how we rate our doctors now online.
Yeah. I mean, I think we consistently value that kind of feedback. I believe that our current administration would like to see more of that happening. I think right now with staff limitations, that our plates are full and we're chugging along as best we can, but
Maybe it need to be informal. And for the time being, and again, if I'm not allowed to ask this, just fill me in, I'll just throw the question. For the time being, until Don and I feel really comfortable, can you meet with us and help us set the new agenda? Are you good with that?
Yes.
Okay.
So is there any further? So you need to do number 3, and we need to go back to the consent agenda number 1. So item 3 is to discuss and take appropriate action on the report from the city council. What do you want to do with this information?
Can I ask one more question?
Maybe, go ahead and try.
The bottom, I assume that these recommendations go all the way through additional council member recommendations at the bottom. Did all this park information come to council from the Parks and Recs Committee about a parkland dedication ordinance? Did that come through Parks and Rec or to council?
No, that's coming from a council member. That same council member, has brought it up with the comprehensive plan work group. The comprehensive plan work group, also put it into the comp plan, because it was an area highlighted in our citizen surveys as lacking.
Okay,
So it hasn't specifically gone through the Parks Board yet. I believe the suggestions here are pretty standard, meaning, most cities have something like this in place already, or they're putting them in place. And I believe that this is just like a kind of a standard average to consider. Wood Creek could obviously do whatever they wanted, and set their own standards. Why this is important is because when a developer comes into and develop areas, the city can require them to set aside a portion of their lot for green space and undeveloped. They can also require a parkland dedication to come back of usable land. So these are things Wood Creek could pursue in the future. And right now, we don't have anything directly in our ordinances telling them. So it aligns with the comp plan, it aligns with citizen input, and it is, these recommendations came from the Parks liaison.
okay.
Okay, we discussed other items on this report from the city council. I am particularly interested in chapter 34, which is our emergency planning. I would be interested in helping with do that. My father was an emergency preparedness coordinator in Kansas, and so I have some background with that. So, when we get ready to do that, I volunteer to help with that.
Wonderful, thank you. And I would like to encourage all of our committee members, if there are areas in which you have some expertise or experience, please speak right up and volunteer. You will probably never, ever be turned down.
So can I speak to that real fast, if you don't mind,
Please.
So Emma sets your agenda. She's meeting with Donna right now and they're talking about it. And then I meet with them to help just coordinate the effort and like how to write the actual agenda. But as members of this committee, you all have the right and the ability to submit items for them to consider placing on the agenda. And they should place them on the agenda. So with that in mind, Donna could absolutely review chapter 34, make a bunch of suggestions for how it should be rewritten, request that item be put on the agenda. The committee looks at her suggestions, makes comments, and then decides to send it up the chain of command.
How is that request ordinarily made? Do they email me? Do they email you? Do they email Suzanne? How does that made?
They should email their chairperson.
I'm glad you
And
said
if you
that.
would like to copy me to help Emma with organization, I'm willing to do that. If you would like to copy Donna, you should not, because now you're getting into 3 of your own people. So just pick one, either Donna or Emma. And I'm a third party who can be helpful. You can also email staff directly. I will say that they get an excessive amount of emails. So in the effort of efficiency, you might want to make sure that Emma or myself is copied, because I see less emails. I can help. You know, Emma's directly responsible for producing the agenda. If you send it to staff, y'all are amazing, but you also get like probably 100 emails a day. So, yeah.
On a slow day.
Yeah, depending on them, only for communication can be slower.
And we will be helpful. But we can't sit down.
Thank you for this.
Yeah, that's handy, isn't it? Now, I would have just sent it to you, but I didn't know I was allowed to do this, so I just printed it.
And Emma, if Steve sends you an agenda item that he'd like to see on the agenda and copies you and Deborah, and then y'all start thinking about, okay, well, we need to start planning the agenda. I mean, you can just pass it right on to them. It's not coming from Steve to both of you at the same time, and all of a sudden you just have a quorum.
I see. So let's say send them to me and then I'll pass them along. Sounds good.
One question I have, if I can, is I'm not seeing a lot of what we're talking about in here.
Well, I haven't looked at that piece of paper yet, so I don't know.
You know, and this is for, order new committee September sixth, 2:30.
Oh, are you talking about that piece of paper you just?
Yeah.
I got it, I think I got it from our agenda and I just printed it on my own printer was all.
Okay.
It's where I got that. Or maybe Deborah, where did I get that? You have no idea? I think you sent it to me.
That is an email that when we met, I wrote it out and I sent it to staff and said, you all set your
So
agenda.
that's just our agenda, that's all that is.
Okay.
And I just made notes on about it myself.
I'm just like, to get that agenda before.
You know what, Brooke, I'm gonna do better about that. The truth is, I was overwhelmed because I didn't know what to do with all these pieces of paper. But now I've learned to kind of set the pieces of paper aside and just carry on.
I just
And
need
so
to look in front of me sometimes.
Exactly. I will start doing things this coming week instead of the week before the next meeting. I will do them the week. I think things will go better that way. Yeah, I hear you. I'm the same way. I'm last night looking through these papers and, oh Lord. So we'll do better. We're just in the hang of it.
But we've been at it for almost a year now,
Still
and,
getting the hang of it.
and, you know, the original goal was, okay, we'll get everything in, and we'll have the agenda posted like days before it used to be, and give everybody a chance to, you know, well, it's like, yeah, say that. And then, you know, sure enough, you know, it's like, oh my God, the 72 hours is almost out, you know, we gotta get the agenda. But just like, it's work. But you know, what we'll do, council, a lot of times, is like, if we're, you know, pretty much ahead of the game, we've got the agenda, you know, and it's gonna be like a tricky agenda or something like that. We'll say, okay, we'll send it out as a draft to council. You know, so you can, if you've got, you know, an agenda together and you wanna send it out as a draft
Oh, draft.
to
Good
the
idea.
committee, you can do
Good
that.
idea. Okay, good idea. And that gives all of our committee members a chance to prepare, and that will make our meetings much more productive.
One day, we'll just see if I can sit it. See it.
Yes, exactly. No, I hear you. Yeah, okay, we'll.
Karen, do you have your hand up?
I'm
Karen?
still back on this other item. I'm so sorry. If I could ask one more question, or are we done? Because I see two things on this areas of focus that look like they should be no-brainers, but I don't know where you refer them, like the masonry requirement. If we were to take action and say, okay, the ordinance review committee wants to initially recommend that the two items sent to us that are out of line with state code be fixed. How do we do that, and who do we refer that to?
You just did it and you tell who you want to fix it. Do you want to send it to P and Z? Do you want to send it to council?
I have no idea. That's where I need help. I know, I guess council, and then they figure out who owns these. I mean, I know there's other committees that write, but these two ought to be pretty easy, because literally we're out of compliance with the state, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are asking council to refer these to the appropriate bodies, be it council or another committee or P&Z, I don't know, to bring the city of Wood Creek into compliance on the masonry requirements and the Board of Adjustment ordinance.
Is that your motion?
Close enough, and then I'm functioning on number 3 on the regular agenda.
Okay, so Karen has moved that masonry.
Thank you for helping.
Yes, ma'am. Has moved that masonry requirements and alignment of the Board of Adjustment be brought into, alignment, I'm gonna say it again, with state code. Does she have a second?
I second that.
And that this will be sent to council to deal with?
Yay. Thank you.
They're gonna vote on it though.
Yeah, well, still, we've made progress, we've made progress.
No, it's going into play, I can tell.
So second on that?
Somebody seconded it.
I did.
I did.
Yeah, take a vote now. Suzanne, when Suzanne catches up, we'll have a vote.
Yes, I got it. The committee member Karen Duncan, yes or no?
Karen, yes
Karen,
or
we're
no?
voting.
Yeah,
Committee member Steve Pasalakwa,
Yes.
chairperson Emma Davenport,
Yes.
vice chair Donna Hector.
Yes, ma'am.
okay, so I got another one to keep us moving. So when I said take a look in baby steps and ask the question, is the code serving citizens on this document that we've already agreed to review? Should I make that a motion? And then we're also taking action on number 2 and say that I make a motion that as the members of the committee review their assigned ordinances on important Wood Creek City ordinances, that they look at these 2 questions sent from council. Are these specific ordinances serving citizens, and is there an opportunity for reduction in punishment or enforcement? Can that be a motion?
Yep. And
Okay.
we need a second.
I think I'm starting to understand what you're asking us, Deborah. I'm so sorry to be slow and late.
She mentioned making a motion on number 2.
So she's acting on this item, she's using these 2 questions, and she's moving that, subcommittee members review the portions of the
Important Wood Creek.
important city ordinances now with these 2 questions in mind. Is this code serving citizens and looking for reductions in enforcement?
As well as what we agreed to see if it's accurate and can be better stated.
Accurate and better stated.
Yeah, that, I think that's what we agreed to do when you were helping us get assignments.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll second.
Yeah,
that
you kind of discussed it, but it wasn't part of the motion.
Yeah.
So
the point of the
I'm
vote,
on both 3 and 4. So I'm responding to both 3 and 4 in the agenda.
So this is what she's talking about with these numbers? Is that what she's talking about?
no, your actual packet, so this one, so this is what I was saying earlier, you need to reference that one because you have consent agendas on it. So, the front page. So there, it reminds you, you call to order, you do your roll call, you ask for public comments, and then you proceed into the consent
Oh, you're
agenda.
talking about right here.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's a problem, so I need to see that ahead of time, not when I walk in and I put it aside and say, I'll read this next week.
Yeah. So just a reminder, everyone, you receive an email from city staff, and your agenda is posted, and there's a link in that. And if you follow that link, it takes you to this exact document that you will see on your desk when you come in. And it'll have your minutes, it'll have all the items and your attachments. That tells you the order the meeting is supposed to go through. And then Karen made a good point here. I just want to talk about the motions. The motions are how you decide business.
Okay.
You guys can talk about something all day long, but until you make a motion, it is not official business yet. And the reason being is that you all have the right to discuss everything. You have the right to make a motion and someone can second and support it, and then you have a right to vote it down. So maybe, Steve, I'm gonna throw you under the bus. Maybe Steve's like, no, I'm not ready to do that with this document yet. Steve could vote no. And if other people feel the same way as Steve, they can also vote no. And then that part of it fails. Now you still move forward with your initial part of everybody doing subcommittees and looking at the document, but potentially that other stuff fails. Now you guys have not taken that vote, right? So now is the moment when you all decide, do we want to go more in depth with this document in these portions of code right now, as Karen's recommending, or do you just want to stay on the surface level? Does this make sense? So that's why the motions are important, because they can shift your assignments, which is good.
But Karen's motion does not mean that we're going to in-depth review every one of these 14 points by next month.
Isn't it fact?
In their entirety, we are going to look at, like, for weapons, where it says discharge of weapons is regulated. So I will look at that, I will think about, is it serving citizens?
Okay.
And do we need, what kind of enforcement?
Okay,
So that's it.
do all committee members feel they can, more or less handle that with what they've chosen? Okay. Okay, Karen, you're good with that, I guess, since you made the
Whatever,
motion.
yeah, I'm just trying to link the assignment from the city council to the work we've already agreed to do.
Okay.
Or the request from the city council to the work we've already agreed to do.
Okay, you know, I agree. So we're ready for a vote? Okay.
Committee member Steve Pasquale,
Yes.
Chairperson Emma Davenport,
Yes?
Vice Chair Donna Hector,
Yes, ma'am.
Committee member Karen Duncan.
Yes,
Okay.
And number one.
I move that we accept the minutes from the September, from the August,
Sorry about that.
August 2nd meeting, mid-meeting.
I second that.
Chairperson Emma Davenport,
Yes?
Vice Chair Donna Hector. Yes, ma'am. Committee member Karen Duncan,
yes,
Committee member Steve Pasquale.
Yes.
Someone else has to move to adjourn the meeting.
I can't do the meeting.
I second it.
Awesome. You need to,
You announced at 4:22.
at 4:22.
Good job.
We're getting the hang of it. Bye, Karen.
See
I
you next
plan
month,
to
right?
be, I plan to be back for the next meeting, all things being
Good.
equal. So I hope to
Thank
see
you.
you all in person, and thank you for your patience. I'm so sorry about my computer problems.
No worries.
Travel safe.
We know all about computer problems.
Thank you, Karen. So, you want to set a day and time?
Yeah. We currently meet on the first Tuesday of the month, which would be October 4th. That means your agenda needs to be finalized